We return today to Isaiah as we continue our series looking at the vision of the coming King. It's this week and next week before Christmas as we go through there. Isaiah, who is speaking hope into a world that looked anything but hopeful. Israel was bruised and fearful. They were watching the storm clouds of judgment upon themselves. The kingdom was shaky. This is either preached into exile or as exile was looming, depending on where you number these passages. And the question hung in the air, has God abandoned his people? And into that uncertainty, Isaiah keeps pointing them to someone that he calls the servant of the Lord, the one through whom God will bring his saving purposes to completion. We've already met this servant in the earlier songs. In chapter 42, gentle yet unbreakable. In chapter 49, as we heard last week, chosen from the womb to restore Israel and be a light to the nations. And in the servant song of chapter 50, which we haven't covered in this series, the servant entrusts himself to God even when he is mistreated and misunderstood. And now in Isaiah 53, the fourth and climactic servant song, Isaiah shows us not only who that servant is, but how God will actually save his people. And he describes something that I'm calling the healing exchange, which is simply this: one, stepping into danger so that the many may walk free. One who absorbs the cost so that the others may be rescued. This is not an unfamiliar idea, and it's something that we see in any number of stories and movies, and even in real-life historical events. An example that comes to my mind and came to my mind quite readily this week is in the closing scenes of National Treasure 2. Deep underground, in a collapsing chamber filling with water, the group discovers that the only way out is for one person to stay behind and hold open a massive door. If no one stays, everyone dies. Throughout the movie, Mitch Wilkinson is the antagonist, but he's the one who reaches the mechanism first. He's been driven the whole time through pride and self-interest, determined to prove himself, determined to prove his worth, and he doesn't care who he hurts on the way. But in this moment, something shifts. He's reached the mechanism to hold the door open first, and he looks at the hero and says, "We both know someone has to stay. Let me earn this." And he does. He pushes the hero towards safety and takes the full weight himself. His life is lost, but because he stayed, the others walk free. This is not a perfect picture, but it does help us feel what Isaiah is showing us in this passage. A voluntary and costly exchange. Isaiah 53 begins with an almost cry of disbelief. Who has believed our message? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? The arm of the Lord is an Old Testament way of talking about God's power to save. In the Exodus, the arm of the Lord shattered Pharaoh's army. In the Psalms, time and time again, the arm of the Lord rescues the oppressed. Poetically, Isaiah is grasping hold of that idea and saying, when God's saving power comes, when the arm of the Lord is revealed, who's going to believe it? Who's going to recognise it? Will anyone see this for what it is? Because when the servant comes, he's not going to look like the salvation people are expecting. Isaiah describes him further as he goes forward as a tender shoot, a root out of dry ground. In other words, he's fragile, easily overlooked, growing in a place where you wouldn't expect to find life at all. He has no beauty or majesty, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He is despised and rejected, a man of suffering, familiar with pain, someone people instinctively turn away from. Now, from their earliest days of asking for a king, if you track back through the Old Testament to the days before Saul is anointed as the first king of Israel, they have always longed for someone who would look the part. The cry of Israel was always, give us a king like the other nations. Someone who is strong, someone who is impressive, someone who is glorious. And they know that God has promised to bring his judgment and justice and righteousness through his chosen king, one of the line of David. But Isaiah tells us that when God's saving power turns up, it's going to come wrapped in humility. In fact, the servant comes looking like someone that the world is quite happy to ignore. A tender shoot out of dry ground. Then Isaiah moves from what the servant looks like to why he suffers. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, Isaiah says. Now, throughout the Old Testament, the natural assumption of suffering is that it is judgment and punishment. And not even through the Old Testament. We still have that feeling today, don't we? When something goes bad, lots of people go, well, what have you done wrong? When something's wrong in your life, people point the finger and go, well, what do you need to fix? The people looking at what will happen to the servant will assume, therefore, that he's being judged by God for his own failures. And in fact, it says it very clearly. We considered him stricken by God, smitten by him, and afflicted. But Isaiah corrects that reading. His suffering was not punishment for his own sin. Instead, his suffering is offered in exchange. His suffering is offered in substitution. Listen to the language. He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him. And by his wounds, we are healed. Here is that healing exchange in clear, simple lines. His suffering, our healing. His punishment, our peace. His wounds, our restoration. And Isaiah then names the reason that this exchange is needed. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. And listen to the second half of this line. We all have gone our own way. We often see sin as being about breaking a rule. Maybe one, maybe many. Maybe something small, maybe something huge. But we often think about it as a moment. The moment that something goes wrong and you have done something wrong. But here Isaiah talks about it far differently, doesn't he? In Isaiah's language, it's not just breaking up rule, it's wandering. Wandering away from God, drifting away from the God who gives us life. Each of us choosing our own path, turning to our own way. And ultimately, our wandering doesn't just break the rules. It breaks us. It destroys us. It leaves us tired. It leaves us guilty. It leaves us anxious. Each of us trying to carry the weight of our own lives, our own experience, our own rejection of the God who loves us and gave us life. And Isaiah says, the servant, this servant, the one who God has ordained, this tender shoot rising up out of dry ground, he steps into that place. Why? For the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. We've all wandered away. We've all chosen our own path. We've all rejected God in many small and big ways. But the servant steps in and offers substitution for that. Then Isaiah draws us closer still to the way that the servant bears this suffering. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Like a lamb led to the slaughter, like a sheep before its shearers, he is silent. Isaiah emphasises the innocence of the servant here. He has done no violence and no deceit is in his mouth, yet he's cut off from the land of the living for the transgression of my people. Who are my people? Well, Isaiah's people. Who are Isaiah's people? God's people. For the transgressions of God's people, he's cut off from the land of the living. He dies among the wicked. He is treated as a criminal, yet he's buried with the rich. Even in death, there are hints that God has not yet abandoned him. You're starting to see connections to the gospel reading, perhaps. The shape here in Isaiah is unmistakable. A righteous servant suffering for the unrighteous so that they might be spared. One for the many to free the many at the cost of the one. Then comes an extraordinary turn in verses 10 to 12. It was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer, Isaiah says. This is not because God enjoys suffering. This is not because it somehow fills him with glee. But it is because it is through the suffering that the saving purposes are accomplished. It is through the suffering that the servant will fulfill God's plan and those purposes, and therefore the servant's story doesn't end in death. Death is only one step in the story. For after he has suffered, Isaiah goes on, he will see his offspring. In other words, a people will be born as the fruit of his sacrifice. He will prolong his days. There is life on the other side of this moment of leaving the land of the living. There is life on the other side of death. The will of the Lord will prosper in his hand, Isaiah says. In other words, his mission will succeed. It will accomplish exactly what it was intended to do. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many. He will bear their iniquities. Therefore, God says, I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong. Do you see the picture? The servant dies, yet lives. He is crushed, yet triumphs. He is condemned, yet he becomes the source of righteousness for many. This is that healing exchange in its fullness. The servant's death brings life. His righteousness results in others' justification. His self-giving produces a new and restored people. Now, within Jewish tradition, today and through the centuries, many read this as a story simply describing Israel. In Jewish tradition, this is simply about Israel, the suffering remnant who endure among the nations and are finally vindicated by God. And that's a serious reading, because throughout Isaiah, he does often call Israel God's servant. But here there seems to be something distinct. There's an individuation about it. There's a person who stands distinct from the nation and in fact suffers for the nation. He bears the nation's sins. He brings healing to the nation rather than simply being representative of Israel to the nations. Does that make sense to you? There's something individual that Isaiah is talking about that looks far more person-y than nation-y. That's my great English this morning because my brain couldn't come up with words just there. And the New Testament writers help us to see how Jesus fills uniquely this mission of the servant. How Jesus steps into Israel's story, carries Israel's calling, and fulfills God's mission, and in doing so, brings salvation to Israel and to the nations. The Gospels introduce us to a Messiah who refuses to build his kingdom on spectacle, who refuses to build his kingdom on political strength. They introduce us to a Messiah who comes without earthly majesty, with no palace, no army, no position of influence or power. Instead, he walks dusty roads, keeps company with the weak and the weary, carries himself with the kind of quiet authority that draws some but confounds others. He is despised and rejected, not because he failed, but because he wouldn't fit the categories that people demanded. The religious leaders dismissed him. His hometown misunderstood him. Isn't this Joseph and Mary's son? Didn't he grow up here? Why would we listen to him? Even his own disciples struggled to grasp the road that he walked. Jesus knew what it is to be misread, resisted, and pushed aside. He's a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief, not in abstraction, not just in poetic form, but in the full weight of human experience. He weeps at a friend's tomb. He feels compassion for the crowds. He is moved by the plight of the lonely, the sick, the forgotten, in the language that we often talk about it as the last, the lost, and the least. Those that society didn't give a rip about. Jesus spent all of his time and energy towards. He carries the wounds of the world long before he carries the cross. He's not just a man of sorrows on that tree. He's a man of sorrows through his existence, through his experience. In his trial, he is silent before his accusers. He does not defend himself. He doesn't retaliate, does not grasp at power. But his silence is not weakness. It's the calm, steady resolve of one who has already entrusted himself to the Father, the Lamb who has chosen the path before him. And at the cross, Isaiah's prophecy becomes almost unbearably literal. He is pierced for our transgressions. He is crushed beneath the weight of sin that is not his. My God, why have you forsaken me? He is numbered with the transgressors, crucified between criminals as though he belonged there. He bears shame, ridicule, isolation, the full experience of rejection, and does so willingly. Like a lamb led to the slaughter, like a sheep before his shearers. If we were to read on in the Gospel of Mark, and feel free to do so, in his burial, even the smallest detail aligns with Isaiah's vision. Though executed as a criminal, he is laid in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, a rich man. Honour woven into humiliation. Dignity hidden inside the disgrace. And then wonderfully, the servant's vindication bursts forth in resurrection. He prolongs his days, gloriously, bodily, eternally. The cross is where the exchange is made, one life offered for many. But the resurrection is where God stamps it, paid in full, life restored, done, dealt with. The iniquity is gone. And Jesus sees his offspring. He's the first fruits, the Bible tells us, of a global family redeemed by his blood, drawn from every tribe and tongue. Through his sacrifice, he justifies many, not by asking us to prove ourselves, but by giving himself that we might receive his righteousness as a gift, as we know him. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many. In him, the guilty are declared clean, the wandering are gathered home, and the broken are made whole. Jesus doesn't simply resemble the servant. The Gospels show us someone who embodies him. He steps into Israel's story and carries their calling. He bears Israel's and the world's sin and fulfills the mission that Isaiah saw centuries before. At the cross, the healing exchange becomes the beating heart of the gospel. His suffering, our healing. His punishment, our peace. His wounds, our restoration. His death, our life. And so Isaiah leaves us with the opening question that still rings in our ears. Who has believed our message? Who has believed? The servant has done his work. The exchange has been accomplished. The question now is simply, will you receive it? Will you believe it? Some of you are carrying guilt that you've never spoken aloud. Some of you are exhausted from trying to hold your life together. Some feel unworthy. Others feel proud and self-sufficient. Those are very broad brushstrokes that don't encompass everyone in this room. But all of us, like sheep, have gone astray. All of us have wandered from God. All of us need his healing. The servant has carried it already. Come to him, trust him, hand over in faith what you cannot fix, and receive back what you could never earn. Step into the life that the servant has won for you. He has made the exchange. Because he stayed, you walk free. Because he was pierced, you can have peace. And friends, because he lives, we live. As we put our faith and our trust in him. As we know and are in turn known by Jesus Christ, the Son of God, his chosen servant, who has borne the weight of our iniquity.